Hello, everyone. My name is Vasia Madesi, and I'm working as a project manager in ViLabs, an innovation ball motivating and facilitating young researchers and entrepreneurs to challenge the traditional innovation system in Greece and Cyprus. And I'm also the deputy coordinator of this project. So before we start today, I would like to start by sharing a few words with you about the Gender Equality Academy and what this project is about. So welcome, and I'm about now to share my screen and start the presentation. So what Gender Equality Academy is about. Let's start with a brief introduction. Currently, there are many gender equality programs, projects, and a great gain knowledge and experience about gender equality. Although gender analysis remains rarely appropriated within research projects, at the same time, large differences among research performing organizations in various countries exist, and there is a small proportion of researchers and practitioners that are familiar with theoretical and methodological concepts of gender and feminist scholarship. What G Academy proposes is actually a different way, a more holistic approach. We are an Horizon 2020 project which develops and implements a high quality capacity building program on gender equality in research and innovation and higher education. And this is the first in a series of webinars that will follow up. At the moment, we are offering in-person trainings, interactive and participatory workshops and webinars until the end of the year that are available in our website, gacademy.eu. And next year, and for the following 2 years, we will also offer a series of summer schools in Madrid, Dublin, Budapest, open collaborative courses that will be online and train the trainer sessions at the same time. Okay, this is the partnership. We are a consortium of partners, 12 organizations representing 11 European countries. And this is a very short overview. Thank you very much for the attention, and I will now give the floor on my colleague Maria Sangiuliano, so we can start with this webinar.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar session. It's Natasha Sega speaking, member of Smart Venice, a partner of the GE Academy project. Let me share your screen. I will just briefly introduce you our webinar, and then I will give the floor to our speaker. So, okay. Good afternoon again to everyone. So yes, our webinar is a part of a webinar series that will be developed during the GE Academy project. The goal of our webinar is to making knowledge and good practice example available to a wider audience in a compact but still interactive format. We are going to develop during the next 2 years 12 webinars based on the several topics about gender equality that will be the introduction or introductory session to the related in-person training and workshop on similar issues. The webinar of today has 2 main learning objectives. As you know, we will go through the topic of gender in research and innovation. And the learning objectives are to inform you about the EU policies and framework that are being developed in the last years on gender in research and innovation, and to sensitize on how gender is relevant to innovation policies by presenting relevant case studies. We will have 3 presentations. The first one will be held by Maria Sangiuliano of Smart Venice, and it will be about the first learning objective, so a bit more introductory. while the second and the third presentation by Paula, Wennberg, and Laure Humbert will be more on the second one, presenting you the findings of their case, of their university in these topics. I will just briefly introduce you a few technicalities about the platform we are using. We will have during our webinar 3 Q&A sessions, one after each presentation. For them, we will ask you to use the chat box to type your question also during the presentation. You can find the chat bottom at the black bar. While during the Q&A session, you can also use the raise hand functionality to, we will give you the floor to ask loudly your question directly to the speaker. While the Q&A button, it will be used just for technical issue regarding to the platform. I will just recommend you to select the option all panelists and attendees while you're typing your question in the chat box to have a more interactive webinar and to allow all the attendees to see what you are asking to the speaker. I will then go directly to present you the first speaker, Maria Sangiuliano, that is the CEO and Research Director of Smart Venice. She holds a PhD in Cognitive and Learning Studies, and she has more than 20 years experience in the EU-funded projects. Recently, for example, she was supporting the Equal IST partners in achieving their institutional change for gender equality. The floor is yours, Maria, to start with our webinar.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you for your kind introduction. Let me share my screen. There we go. So good afternoon, everybody, to all our participants and our other panelists. I will give you an introductory presentation today to use the two case studies that we have identified and decided to propose you today. And my presentation will go through a few arguments and questions that I want to address. Basically, I will deal with the development of gender equality in research policies since the last 20 years. We know that they have shifted from an initial focus on scientific research only to a broader scope, including research and innovation. Which have been the steps of this process? How innovation scholars and practitioners have contributed to frame the relations between gender and innovation in a critical way? And which opportunities and challenges is this entailing for universities and other innovation stakeholders? How this, let's say, enlargement of scope can be put in practice? So in this first slide, I am presenting you a graphic with a summary timeline of the almost 20 years long history of gender in research policies at the EU level. The inception, as many of you know, was given by the first EC communication on women in science back in 1999. And the following 7 years were featured by the constitutions of the European Platform of Women Scientists NGOs and the setting up of the Helsinki Group as a lobbying group from different member states. Emphasis was given at that time to the low rate of female representation among European scientists and the acknowledged need for setting up gender disaggregated statistics to carefully monitoring developments and have a full picture of how this low representation of women in research was to be dealt with in the different areas and EU countries. And this led to the delivery of the She Figures report series since 2003. In the following period, in 2002-2006, within the sixth framework program for scientific research, gender equality was considered to be achieved not only via an increased women participation to scientific research, but also through the integration of gender in the research content. And within FP6, if you might remind, all applicants to the program were requested to prepare a gender action plan. This measure actually proved not to work due to the lack of knowledge and expertise from the side of RPOs, research performing organizations, and applicants, and therefore was removed in FP7. Increasingly, the focus was put on the need for spreading awareness and building the capacity of FP7 national contact points and research performing organizations on gender in research policies. Projects such as the Gender in Research Training Program and Toolkit went to this direction, actually. Between FP7 and the Horizon 2020 period just finished, institutional change and integration of gender in research content were proposed as new policy tools and means to achieve gender equality in science, and several projects were funded within this scope and are actually still running within the SWOFs program. The expert group on innovation through gender was funded, and the advisory group, the Horizon 2020 advisory group on gender. So you see that the gender in EU policies agenda was really becoming increasingly complex. We can just mention it was also quite contested along the way. There were, and there probably still are, resistances to these policies. The overall trend that I would like to highlight was that from an initial focus on representation of women in science and the related policy objective of improving the share of female researchers, gender equality policies are using increasingly complex frameworks. The highlighted policy goals on the first row of this pictogram reflect the current 3-year priority on gender in research. So women representation in science, women access to decision-making, top decision-making positions, gender as a dimension in research content. It can be noted how arguments are getting closer to an economic rationale. They are using it quite extensively and are increasingly expanding from scientific research as to broader innovation. Gendered innovation, fostering excellence and competitiveness, contrasting female talents waste are all, let's say, marks of this shifting and enlarged scope, addressing also more broadly innovation. It has also to be stressed, as you see right side of the slide, that intersectionality is also gradually featuring EU gender in research policies as an innovative trait. Horizon 2020's WOF's calls for proposals on institutional change during the last years have explicitly required to address it, although it's still not enough explored, practiced, and understood how this can be made operational. On the other side, as gender in research and science policies are more and more encompassing innovation, as I mentioned, innovation studies and policies as such witness an internal development and changing narratives from their side, getting closer and closer to incorporate social dimensions. Grounded in economics, this field has also been subject to different paradigm shifts. You might know that the basic definition of innovation, which is depicted here in the graph, identifies as its core components invention or scientific and technological research outputs, and their transfer to markets, positioning innovation at the crossroad between these two areas, between science and economics, science and entrepreneurship and industry. But still, the picture is much more complex than the historians of science have stressed how only from the 50s and 70s, innovation as a concept got a positive connotation and became actually a policy solution to achieve economic growth and competitiveness goals until it finally became a goal in itself. We can say a sort of mantra or fix-all solution. I was saying the picture is more complex than this because from the deterministic approach, initial emphasis on the technical and technological components of innovation, a different narrative became prevalent based on open and systemic models. A long time, disruptive and radical innovations are not seen as the only possible patterns. Incremental innovation generated and diffused across technological, business, and also societal are also to consider. The spatial and regional dimension of innovation is highlighted through the widespread concept of innovation ecosystems as multi-actor, co-creation-based innovation systems, as I said, where RPOs, university, research, the academia, as you can see here in the graphic, have a prominent role, and also research funding organizations as part of the public sector. A recent report from the European University Association highlights how collaboration between research performing organizations and the other nodes of these networks are essential in terms of joint applied research projects with multiple funding sources, as government funding to research is shrinking, as we know, but also transfer to and education, capacity building, where universities play a major role, and the talent formation that will impact into the rest of the innovation ecosystem is definitely of great importance. Along the years, also thanks to science, technology, and society studies, well known as DS, critical and reflective approaches to innovation have been developed, and they have started deconstructing widespread bias on innovation and its being positive and desirable by default. Studies on the unintended negative impacts of innovation have been published, and also from the gender scholars and feminists, a new and increasing attention was paid to innovation discourses and policies, providing evidence of the relevance of gender for innovation processes, although with different angles and approaches. Criticizing, rethinking, and expanding definitions of innovation through gender. These have been really the main outcomes of the work that feminist STS studies and gender experts and practitioners working with these issues have been producing. They have started considering social innovation and social economy as drivers of innovation, not only the tech components, and to focus on innovation also within welfare and creative industries area, pointing at the need for redefining innovation policies and for mobilizing resources in areas where women are traditionally more active. These have been highlighted as a way to strike the gender imbalance in innovation rights. It has also been demonstrated and stressed in some of the studies that I quote here, which are only a part of an already quite vast literature available. It has been stressed how innovation can also gradually emerge from everyday life practices, contrasting the exceptionalism discourse which is prevailing in innovation studies, and can stem from behaviors even different from invention, proceeding also by mimicking, reinterpretation, reiteration of already existing practices. Several studies, like the last one I'm quoting, have also stressed how inclusive growth and innovation discourses and policies trying to integrate gender can also be have also to be looked at carefully, and as they can really have limits. Some of these practices and discourses have been found to reproduce images of women as either subjects lacking skills and competencies, or as just mere resources to be put at work to the benefit of the existing system. The inclusion of actors representing women doesn't ensure per se that their voices will be heard, and that power to actually influence the agenda setting and the use of resources within innovation policies. The many aspects where gender is relevant for innovations have been stressed by the Gendered Innovation Project, funded by the EC and delivered by Stanford University and the Science Foundation from the US. It is actually developing practical methods to show how sex and gender are important dimensions of the research and the analysis for scientists and engineers, and how they are positively contributing to innovation. Within this website project, actually, you can find many case studies, from the most well-known ones, like the pregnant crash test dummies for cars, based on male body standards, not taking into consideration pregnant bodies, to their most recent case studies on artificial intelligence and machine learning, demonstrating how algorithms are being trained on gender and racially biased data sets where words or images are associated in biased ways, tend to, and then based on these, algorithms tend to reproduce and amplify this bias. At the policy level, at a more macro level, innovation and equality correlate in a different way as well. A recent study, which will be soon published, from the ERA Standing Working Group on Gender and the Gender Action Project, showed a high correlation level between the Innovation Scoreboard in 2018 and the Gender Equality Index. Basically, it was showed, and it's depicted in the chart here, how countries which are high achievers in the innovation scoreboard are also in the Gender Equality Index, are also classified among so-called innovation leaders or strong innovators in the innovation scoreboard, and vice versa. And most importantly, I would stress, it was demonstrated how the innovation and strong leaders, and the innovation leaders and the strong innovators are those countries which have more measures in place for gender equality in research, much more than other modest innovators countries. So this is quite an important evidence which was provided. It was presented by our partner, Marcela Linkova, 1 year ago at the STEM Equality Conference 2018. And I think it can really be used in a very positive and strong way as a strategic argument for research, for addressing the top management of research performing organizations, but also policymakers at a higher level. It's a strong strategic argument for supporting gender equality in research as an agenda. And it's another evidence of how innovation and gender equality correlate. So to conclude, promoting institutional and ecosystem change for gender equality could go hand in hand. And I think they will more and more go hand in hand inside and outside RPOs. So we know from studies released by innovation agencies such as Vinnova, the Swedish Agency for Innovation a few years ago, have proved how attempts to foster change by balancing inward and outward strategies inside and outside RPOs and across innovation systems can have promising effects to achieve gender equality in research and innovation. Similarly, therefore, RPOs and higher education institutions can place efforts in promoting structural change internally, while at the same time collaborating with other stakeholders from the respective innovation ecosystems, such as schools, regional and city authorities, industry, employers, organizations, but also women's NGO, civil society at large, which are often not considered into triple or quadruple helix models, and can do so addressing areas of joint interest for gender equality along the entire innovation chain, from education and talent formation to scientific research trans-market. And there are already several RPOs which are going to this direction, which are integrating institutional change with strong collaborative actions with external stakeholders. They are linked in the regional arena. The Equal IST Horizon 2020 project, where I've been working recently, we had some interesting examples there. We are going to start a newly approved Horizon project in the next year with a specific approach, with this specific approach, Caliper will be named. And most of all, at this level, we are going to learn from our next invited speakers how they tried to put this into practice. Having said that, I will close and thank for your attention and open the floor to questions and answers.
Thank you, Maria, for your interesting presentation. I've seen that we have already 2 raised hands by Sola and Carolina. I will then allow you both to talk. I will ask you to go straight to your question and straight to your point, to then allow Maria to answer together jointly to your question. Sola, you can ask your question. Okay, I allow Carolina to speak. You can ask loudly your question by unmuting your microphone at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, there is to the left side of the bottom bar, there is a microphone icon. that you should click to unmute.
See that, Sola, now you have unmuted your microphone, right?
Yeah, please.
We cannot hear you.
Right, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your presentation. I mean, it's quite very, very clear on what you have done so far, and I'm just going through the slides again. There are quite few areas of interest because I'm very new in this area of research, and I think for me, it's really more of an just interested in listening out to what is out there, what is currently being researched. So I don't have a question right now because I'm just trying to process a lot of the material that she has presented. So perhaps if you give me a few more minutes just to kind of process my thoughts. Like I said, it's a fairly new area of research for me. And I'm quite interested in the gender and the role of universities. So I'll continue to listen out and then maybe I'll ask questions later on. Is that okay?
Yes, okay, of course. We will move then. Unfortunately, Carolina cannot find her microphone. You can type your question in the chat box if you don't find it on the phone. And in the meanwhile, I will read the another question that arrived. So Maria, do you believe gender quotas in universities and research institutions represent a solution for gender bias in research? It was in the Q&A window, so I think I've just seen it.
Yeah, actually, there are, as we also highlighted in our previous webinar on institutional change and gender equality plans for gender equality in research. Although for sure, increasing the number of women in top decision-making position in a research institution is one of the ERA priorities. We cannot say that there is one single, let's say, solution to this very complex problem, which needs to be addressed and tackled from many different angles. We know that quotas are controversial for many different reasons. I personally believe that, yeah, I would say I am an advocate of quotas, simply because you know, power structures in academia are so much well established and entrenched that soft measures are always useful. Raising the awareness, building capacity, building gender expertise, working at other levels is important, but also positive actions, affirmative actions such as quotas are definitely needed. They can be put forward in many different ways. It can be stressed that they can be temporary measures. There are several forms such as target quotas or let's say softer versions of quotas that can be applied. I just wanted to stress that from the same studies from the ERA Standing Working Group in Gender that I was quoting earlier, it was found for among the strong innovators countries, Austria, Iceland, Ireland, and Norway are the only countries with national target quotas to achieve gender balance among university professors. So this might mean something.
Yes, thank you, Maria. I think this leads also to Carolina's question that is asking which countries are leading in innovation based on the Gender Equality Index. And she asked about the Nordic paradox, if you...
The Nordic paradox, Okay, for sure, we know that Nordic countries are leading in terms of gender equality policies. In Europe, the Nordic paradox, I'm not sure I'm familiar with this label, let's say, or this definition, but maybe you, Carolina, can say a few words more about this. Or no, she couldn't, she cannot access the microphone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I suggest you, Carolina, maybe to okay, she wrote. Okay, she's saying that they are leading in plans, but not in reality. When you look at the number, I think she's explaining about the Nordic paradox. And we have another question by Sola. She's wondering if your example of good practices are between EU and if you experience, I guess, good practices between EU and Africa.
Okay, so yeah, about the question from Carolina, leading in plans probably means in the diffusion of gender equality plans in research, but not in reality when you look at numbers. Yes, of course. It is quite clear that it is, I mean, much more time is needed in implementing gender equality policies before the outcomes can be reflected in actual numbers, and this is due to a series of issues. When I was mentioning the studies on the critical gender studies on innovation and innovation policies, I was quite struck to realize that, to acknowledge that they come from Nordic countries, actually, where initial attempts to mainstream, to integrate a gender perspective into innovation policies are then followed in the next cycle by diluting attempts, so that resources are then shrinked and let's say softer measures put in place. This is probably due also to resistances that gender equality policies are in a way generating after they are put forward. This resistance has often taken the form, and probably this is especially relevant for Nordic countries, the form of the so-called gender fatigue, where gender equality policies are perceived as very normative, top-down agendas imposed by EU institutions. So.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I'm afraid now we need to move to our second speaker, Paula Wennberg. I will now...
Natasha?
Yeah?
Right, okay, my question on good practice between EU and Africa, is it for Maria to just shed a little bit of light if there's any research or perhaps materials that maybe she's exposed to that she can share, please?
Well, actually, at this point in time, I don't have a reference or a quote that I can come out with. I remember that last year I came in touch with an organization that was promoting joint cooperation between Spanish research institutions and universities and governments from different Northern African countries.
Right.
But I cannot remember now the name of the organization. There will be increased cooperation between the EU and third countries, because a project has been just recently approved on EU third countries cooperation to enhance gender equality in research. It still has to be kicked off, but more info will be, more information and data will be provided within that framework. If you type your address in the chat box, I will send you the reference to the organization that I was mentioning. And I'm sorry if I didn't manage to reply, but other speakers will for sure manage to address the remaining topics.
Yeah, and so you can also find
I've
some
just
link
my
in
email
the...
address.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's very useful.
Thank you, Sola. So, as I was saying, we are going to proceed with our second speaker. I will share again my screen. So I'm happy to introduce you Paula Wennberg, that from the Center for Distance Spanning Technology of Lulea University of Technology in Sweden. She's a founder and manager of Gender Contact Point, a collaboration and resource platform based at the university. With more than 20 years experience of regional and national projects, she has developed a big number of gender equality and diversity tools. She is going to explain us about the journey of Lulea University toward the gender equality in the ICT sector. Paula, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Yes, my name is Paula Wennberg, and I come from Lulea University of Technology in Sweden. So now we are going from Venice to Lulea. I'm based at a research center in the field of ICT, and we have been working with innovations in close collaboration with researchers, companies, and other organizations for about more than 20 years now. The topics of my talk today are, I will guide you shortly through the innovation concept. It's on one slide, so it's very short. I will talk about challenges regarding gender equality at our university and benefits of gender equality. Also, our journey the last 10 years when mainstreaming gender in our projects, programs, and activities at our research center. Examples of implementation, and I have also listed tools and methods which are available for anyone to use. So here you see where we are based, where we are located in Sweden, in northern Sweden. Yes, we have winter now, and yes, we have lots of snow. And we also started, the skiing season also started now, so we are very happy for that. So the key elements of our operations at our research center are collaboration and co-creation between academia, industry, public sector, and citizens and end users. How we define innovation in a very short way is innovation is something new that is used. So we try to bring ideas to life here in Lulea. There are many degrees of innovation and degrees of change. So there are small ones and they are big revolutionary innovations. And there are many types of innovations: democratic innovations, organizational, product and service innovations, social innovations, and technical innovations. And here I think we have a poll question. I think I give this for Natasha.
Yes, Paula, they are answering right now to
Yeah.
the poll.
Great.
Okay. If everyone has voted, I will end the poll. Okay. So you can share the results are shared.
I just can't see that, so can you tell me the
it's this. Okay, so we have an 83% of people that agree and a 70% of people that disagree about your question.
Okay, so this is what I thought you would say too, you know, and the question is that why the technical innovations get most of attention and, for instance, social innovations less attention. But let's talk about that more after my presentation. So a few words about the challenges here at our university, and I guess they are not so surprising for you. This is a technical university, so there are few women professors, and we have extremely few women in ICT and some areas of engineering. So the big question for us is how can ICT be more attractive to both women and a broader group of men? We have been struggling with these issues for many years. Already at the 1980s, the university started to encourage women and girls to study engineering. We have had focus on individuals in the past, and now we focus on more on culture and structures of the university, and we also target both men and women in our interventions. Benefits of the gender equality. There are many of them. I have put together one slide of some of them, and there are many studies that show that that gender equality enhances excellence in research and innovation. The quality of research is improved when questions are twisted and turned from different perspectives. And it also leads to an in-depth understanding of people's needs, behavior, and attitudes. And we also experience since almost 10 years that the companies are asking more for useful knowledge and tools based on gender research. They do see the gender dimension as a competitive edge. Products and services will be more respondent to users and consumers' needs. And it also broadens the labor market for both men and women here in our region and contributes to more sustainable growth. This is about our journey when working on these issues, and our goal is to promote gender-aware and inclusive research and innovation systems. We started in 2008 mainstreaming gender into research and development and innovation projects and programs here at our research center. We have been implemented the gender dimension in diverse projects. I have listed a few of them here, and I will also talk about some of them later in my presentation. We have also developed own tools and methods with our gender researchers and companies to stimulate and this work in our core operations. 2014 we established Gender Contact Point, which is aimed to make the gender research and the gender research results easier to access from outside of the university. And my ongoing project now is called Gender Smart Arena. The main purpose is to strengthen the collaboration between academia, industry, and other organizations. I made a few slides about examples how we have been implemented gender in our projects. We started in Satin project. Satin actually developed a platform to enable end users without prior programming skills to create own apps. The design process was in focus when mainstreaming gender here, and this example will be found in the GD toolbox we produced during the project. And also this cases as study case will be found in the licentiate thesis from 2014. The licentiate thesis has title Exploring Self-Efficacy in End-User Programming, a Feminist Approach. During this Satin project, which was concluded 2014, we got many questions about how we could measure the effects of gender equality activities in Satin and other interventions we had here at the university. And this is why we created this project, Equality, together with the university in Finland, some ICT companies, and a community center in Finland to try to measure the effects. You can read more about this pilot in the handbook, Innovation and Gender, How to Boost and Measure Change. This was also included as a study case by the Dr. Eva Kjellhammer, and this one is in Swedish though, but it's part of the doctoral thesis of hers. Genovate is one of the FP7 projects, and our driver was here when taking part in this Genovate project was to try to make an impact regarding higher academic decision-making bodies here at the university. This is an issue, and for us try to raise the women professors. Genovate was coordinated by UK, and we had the responsibility for one of the work packages dealing with ICT innovation systems. We have also pulled together methods and tools and how we how we integrated gender in this project, and it's available in the toolkit promoting sustainable JACE. OPTI is one of the Horizon projects in dealing with the next generation district heating and cooling systems. Here we had focus on integrating gender dimension in the research content, decision making, communication, user participation, and consumer interaction. Data centers, which is one of the focus areas at the research center, has been one of the projects who actually wanted to integrate this dimension in their operations, and we are contributing to the development of this new data center industry in our region. Gender contact point I have already mentioned here, and as I said, its goal is to make results of the university's gender research available and easier to access for the surrounding society. And Gender Smart Arena is trying to strengthen this kind of collaboration. This is my last slide where I listed some tools and methods we have developed during these 10 years. So please take a look if you are interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, for your presentation. Now we are opening the Q&A session. I see that there are 2 raised hands, and okay, there is a question also to see the last slide again quickly. I will do it right now and continue with the Q&A with this slide open. Okay. So, wait a second. I will now give the floor to Matthias that raised his hand.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Paula, for your presentation. I had a question. So obviously with Scandinavia, we always have the impression, or from outside, it all sounds like this is the success stories and what was working, and that I'm not saying that it came naturally. In your experience of what you've experienced, what were the biggest obstacles in pushing this forward, in pushing gender equality in research and innovations forward? And I don't know, are there any tips that you could give in terms of what worked best in terms of making these kind of successes? And so there's a lot of work behind these achievements. So I just wanted to get a sense of what your thoughts were on this. Thank you.
Okay, I left that part actually because I only had 20 minutes. So, and I could start with telling you that we do try to work with people who want to actually implement the gender dimension in their project. So I think I might face less resistance than you could imagine, but there are also always obstacles. I was thinking about the first SATIN project. We did have some challenges to find the way to integrate this dimension in the research content, and what we did was actually I made an app, gender app. This satin platform was supposed to enable people to create their own apps, and I thought that might be some kind of a door to collaboration if I do that app. I think it was one of the first or second app created on that platform. So that was kind of an opening to this kind of collaboration. We also, one of the universities participating in the project, they hired the lady who was working on her licentiate thesis, and that was also a way of bringing in some gender knowledge and on this level to the project. So it took maybe 1 year of the 4 to come to that stage that all people were on board.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, thank you, Paula, for your answer. I have 2 more questions here for you. One is from Christina that asks you suggestion from where to obtain funding for organizing international gender events, while the other one is from Carolina that asks for 3 advices on how to boost gender innovation, based, of course, on your experience.
Okay, the first question was about the funding opportunities, and what we have done, we actually have a part of the ongoing ICT or technology project. We have a budget there to make this happen. It's kind of one of the activities in the project to be able to work with these issues. Otherwise, it won't be possible for us either. So it has to be part of the project, and we usually are involved in the proposal writing and to be able to run the work in the project. So it's not something we are doing separately. It has to be done in the project. And then I got an answer about how we can boost the gendered innovation. Okay, I think in gender mainstreaming in general is kind of it is a strategy. The goal is gender equality, and gender mainstreaming is the strategy we use, and we need to implement this dimension in the innovation and try to promote a change process so that people they need knowledge, they need tools and methods, and you need to monitor this kind of work. And the ultimate goal for us is actually that the people will own this process during the project already, so it will go on when we conclude the project. And follow-up is often missing, so that's a very important thing. You made plans, you have concrete activities, and you have to follow up them.
Okay, thank you. We have a very last question from Carolina that is asking if your tool accepted in the PhD education when students are designing their PhD project.
I wonder if I understood the question.
Yeah, accepted maybe. she wanted to write.
Actually, if you mean that these handbooks which are online and which are tool kits and gender apps we have developed, they are for everybody to use, and most of the students or researchers here at the university and in other universities in Sweden and Europe also, they actually want to use our handbooks and toolkits, and that's of course up to them to use. We also organize workshops to guide people how to use these tools if it's something people want.
Okay, thank you. There are 2 more questions by Christina, but I will collect them and then answer to you by email, asking Paula, of course, their answer, because we need now to move to our last presentation, held by Laure. I will briefly introduce her to you. So Laure Humbert from the Oxford Brookes University is a PhD and reader in gender and diversity and the director of the Center for Diversity Policy Research and Practice at the Oxford Brookes University. She has worked extensively on methodologies and indicators for measuring gender equality in different settings. She's now explaining us about the main funding of a project that the Oxford Brookes University conducted in relation to gender in Spinout's companies. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, is it working?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Right, so in this presentation, indeed, I was asked to talk about one of the projects that we're conducting on women and innovation, which is not a European project, but is funded by the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council here in the UK, where I live. So our approach to think about this is to think about the transformative changes that we've seen in the world of work and to look at this at different levels. So we're looking, for example, at global levels at the ILO Centenary Declaration and the emphasis that they're putting on is ensuring that we have inclusiveness and equality in harnessing the fullest potential of technological progress and productivity growth. In the UK, at national level, we also have a number of initiatives going on, in particular the UK National Industrial Strategy, which is really focusing on increasing investments in science, research and innovation. And this is mirrored for us in the Oxfordshire area, where we also have a local industrial strategy, which aims to position us as one of the top global innovation ecosystems. So we have strong innovation ecosystems and we see the potential for having a revolution in terms of the economies that we're going to produce. But when we actually look at data, we realize that it's very dominated by men. So European tech, so in the UK, 83% men. 83% of UK venture capital is also going to all men teams. And there is a strong understanding that gender bias remains a problem in startups. So when we look at women inventors globally, the proportion between 1998 and 2017 has increased from 7% to 13%, but that remains very, very low. In most countries, including the UK, we see very similar patterns. So for the UK, the proportion of women inventors only increased from 8% to 11%. In Oxfordshire, for us, the proportion of women inventors was 13%. This is quite high, as I will show in a little bit, because of the universities that we have in the region. And what we see, and this is very interesting, is we see that inventions are coming from two different systems. They could come from academia or they could come from industry. But actually, the academic environment seems to be a little bit more congenial to women being inventors. So we started our research on the premise that we see the roles of universities as central to building a gender inclusive innovation ecosystem, and where you can really have an approach bottom up from research to knowledge exchange, and top down just having feedback and leverage between the financial sector, policymakers, businesses, NGOs, and international government organizations as well. Why are we doing this? Inclusive technology is tech inclusive. Maria talked a little bit about this earlier. What we're asking is who is doing the tech, but particularly not only who is doing the tech, but what are the cultures in which people get to do some tech? And if we were going to transform those cultures, what would inclusive tech look like? And there's loads of examples of inclusive technology. This is something that recently was produced. It's a CPR dummy. So when you do a cardiac massage, it just had to actually think about having a dummy which has shapes that are in the form of the breast and how you do compressions. So there is a lot of examples of how we are not yet thinking how we just need to address the needs of everybody in society. So the questions that we're asking in our research is, what is the role of universities as catalysts for research and development and its commercialization? And how can we actually change systems and cultures to promote individuals, cultures, and content that is inclusive? In our project, we are, I'm only going to provide a small overview of this. We have 3 work packages. The first one is about researching, and we have quite an ambitious quantitative and qualitative research program here, where we are looking at, in the UK, sex disaggregated data on women's participation in spinouts. But we're also combining that with a lot of interviews and focus groups to understand women's participation in spinouts companies' leadership, but also to really understand the culture around that. So speaking to women, but thinking about speaking to men as well, and the people in the organizations. The 2 further work programs are looking at raising awareness, developing mentoring opportunities, and so on, and also building some tools that are there and going to be available to promote inclusive academic entrepreneurship. So what is a spin-out companies? Just to make clear what we mean by spin-out companies. Just the commercialization of research in universities typically happens in 2 different ways. It could either be in a startup company, and that's going to be by staff or students, for example, at doctoral level. And in a spin-out company, you have a commercialization, but it is unique in that the institution from which the innovation originates is going to have a financial stake in the company itself, and is going to be much more involved, therefore, in the governance and the setting up and the patenting of that innovation. So some key findings, this is really at geographical level what we have in the UK. What we see in the UK is that the ecosystem for spin-outs is very polarized. So Scotland has produced 16% of all spin-outs in the UK, and it also has the highest rate of spin-outs per institution. What we also see is what we call the golden triangle. So the golden triangle is really the vertices between Oxford, Cambridge, and London, and mostly Imperial College London. A quarter of all spin-outs originate from the University of Oxford or the University of Cambridge. So we see here the importance of having ecosystems that are very supportive of having innovation. So from these a small handful of institutions, we have the majority of spinouts in the UK. If we look more widely, we see that 82 institutions in the UK have at least one active spinout. That's about 2/3 of universities have at least one active spinout. But the actual rate of spinouts per institution is quite low. There's only 47 institutions that have, 47 institutions have less than 5 spinouts. So the majority of them just don't have very high spinout activities. And the ecosystem is quite polarized as well, in the sense that 70% of spinouts originate from a Russell Group institution. So the Russell Group, if you don't know what it is an elite group of institution which has quite a lot of resources and a very active research culture usually. So the majority of spinout companies just come from this minority of institutions in the UK. When we look at it from the participation of women, we look at the IDs, who are the founders. And we see that in the spinouts that we have looked at, for which we have data since 2011, we only have 13% of founders which are women. If you move on a little bit into the governance and just look at how spinouts are being run, and if you look at the C-suite, who is managing those spinouts, the average board size for a spinout in the UK is 4.6, and that's only 0.6 women overall. And as the companies grow, this proportion of women tend to decrease because there's a masculinization of this governance. And in terms of growth, what we see is that even when women make it into spinout and participate, it's also associated with lower growth and investment. So their sizes are smaller, the investment is smaller, they make less profit, and so on. So we're really looking at a very masculine ecosystem for spinouts. And in some of the qualitative work that we are currently doing to explore that, we are seeing a number of things. So you have some quotes here from some women that tell us that they think it's harder for women to raise money from the old boys club because it's more a more dominated world. Raising money as female is more difficult. And I know this is documented. So we really have this key idea that it's not so much women themselves and this idea of fixing the women, but really thinking about how we address the old boys club and the masculine culture that is associated with spinouts and very often in STEM disciplines. We have another participant that told us that her mentor said to her that when she went to do the pitch, she should wear the tartiest dress to give that pitch. And here, this is really speaking again to a culture of stereotypes, which is borderline on the gender-based violence and harassment. So it just addressing this and making sure that we have cultures that become much more inclusive is just going to be something quite important in fostering inclusive innovation. And finally, we had a participant telling us this quote. I was like, you know what? I don't have to do this. I don't have to spend 3 hours of an entire evening on the phone on a conference call. I would rather put my daughter to bed. And for us, this is speaking a lot about sustainable ways of working, about finding alternatives and moving away from, again, very masculine ways of working in which you have emphasis on long working hours and being seen, being visible. So how can you help us make setting up a spinout more gender inclusive? What we would like is for you to help us share our findings as they develop. You can find a lot of the resources on our website for this and reports, facts and figures. We'd like you to think about reviewing your organizational practices, looking at, if you're working in a university, looking at the policies that are in place to ensure that there is gender inclusive commercialization of research. And finally, engaging with us in developing this. This is work that we have so far developed in the UK context, And I see particularly a lot of scope to try and replicate and generate a lot more knowledge in a European or global context. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for your interesting presentation and interesting project. We already have 2 questions for you, but I recommend the other to type their question or to raise their hands to ask question to Anne now. Mm-hmm. So Christina is asking an advice about institutions that are organizing course for certification of gender experts, and a suggestion to 3 actions to reduce the glass ceiling in gender equality.
Certification for gender trainers. There are many efforts being made at the moment to think about what certification could look like. I think it's not so much related to this work that we are doing on this particular project. The only thing that I could say on this is I think it would be very important in gender certification to have some more element of how technology is changing the world. I think a lot of the knowledge that we have as gender experts and gender scholars is still rooted into an old vision of the world. So having discussions about the relevance in gender and inclusion on new technologies, on artificial intelligence, on STEM subjects, and building up that understanding would be very valuable. And then the other question was 3 ways to break the glass ceiling?
Yeah.
I would say one of the main ways to ensure that we have inclusive cultures is to ensure that we change the mindsets of those that have power to change things. Often these are our leaders, and they are more likely to be men. So we need to think about engaging those powerful men and just make sure that they are part of this process of change. Another thing that I think is very important, again, not so much related to this project, but we already discussed the possibilities of having quotas. So I'm not going to necessarily be advocating quotas, but I think the discussion is worth having, and is worth having in depth. And there is a lot of evidence that suggests that quotas are working much better than targeted actions, particularly when they are associated with certain types of sanctions. So it's just, again, part of the threat of quotas is also something that's powerful. So 2 out of 3 have run out of powerful actions.
Thank you, Anne. We have a comment from Carolina that is, okay, that say that target men that are decision maker, but they have daughters. Make research before you start communication. I'm not sure if that is a question or a comment from Carolina, but it's a comment, okay. Yeah. Indeed.
Well, I would want to target everybody. It's just, I don't think it's just having daughters is a good thing. I think we want a better world for our daughters and our sons. And inclusion is this. It's just also breaking models of masculinities that are not helpful to anybody, and that are just damaging to society, to the environment. And but maybe I'm just digressing.
Indeed. Okay. Sola is typing. She thanks all of you for your presentation and for sharing your research. And she said that it was very interesting and it is worth to follow up.
Yeah. Can I just say one last thing, because I had two actions. I think also something that I would like to call for is because I talked about the role of men, but I think there is a very great role for women to engage in this and to make sure that as women, we support each other and we support this process of change to make a better society for both women and men. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for all our presenter. If there are no other questions, I will give the floor now to Mergaert, our scientific coordinator of the Gender Equality Academy project, and then to Vasia Madesi for final recommendation.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, speakers, for your interesting contributions. So let's sum up what we have heard this afternoon. So Maria Sangiuliano from Smart Venice gave us an overview of the 20 years of EU policy on gender in research, and she has shown how this policy also has been increasingly complex in its approach to address gender inequalities in research and science, and over the years has also started to encompass and to address the area of innovation. And so linking knowledge creation also with the economic sphere. Maria has also explained to us how innovation relates to science and research, and how gender perspectives can contribute to innovation policies and practices and improving those. And lastly, and I think this is a very important and strong argument that we can also use towards our decision makers and others that have decision-making power, is that there is a strong correlation and a proven correlation even between gender equality and innovation performance. So this is really an argument that that is of relevance for those in decision-making positions, and that can be convincing. Our second speaker, Paula Wennberg from Lulea University, has explained to us the trajectory, and she has explained the many different projects and initiatives that her university, Lulea, has been involved in. And interestingly is the perspective that there are many different types of innovation, and the importance of co-creation and collaboration for innovation, which has underpinned the different projects and different approaches that Lulea University has implemented. She pointed out that it's important to address the organization and its culture to improve the diversity of its workforce, rather than focusing on the position of individuals in these organizations. And in her last slide, Paula has also shared with us useful resources and tools that can be inspirational also for us and other universities who are willing to take up action for gender equality and more diversity. Our third speaker, Laure Humbert from Oxford Brookes University, has emphasized the importance of the innovation ecosystem and technology in our societies and for shaping our world, while at the same time these spheres are marked by a severe underrepresentation of women, and that is of course problematic. And the role and responsibility of universities to transform the cultures towards more inclusive technology is therefore not to be underestimated. And her organization, Oxford Brookes University, has engaged in a research project that studies spin-out companies. And Anne has shared with us some first findings of the research, and we can of course address and visit the website and see the consult reports to know more of the results of that project. And Anne has ended her presentation with a call for action to the participants in this webinar to take up also the efforts to support the project's efforts and to start also sharing the results of the project, and we can even contribute to the project. I think that these are the main points of today's webinar. Vasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for summing everything up. And I would also like to thank all the participants and all the speakers. And actually, I have one final note from my side, which is what is coming up next for Gender Equality Academy. Of course, we would like to see you in more sessions. So there is a workshop organized in Barcelona, Spain. So if you are based there, the registrations are still open. The topic of it is dealing with resistances. There are 2 more in-person trainings. There is one in Montpellier, France, and the course language is in French on how to avoid gender bias in recruitment and promotion. And there is another one in Italy towards gender-aware research organization, what you need to know but never dare to ask. And there, I would like to let you know that the registration is open for all these sessions and that more sessions will come up the following year on 2020. So please follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, and of course follow our news on the website. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, also from my side. Your participation was really precious, and we really appreciate your involvement. Goodbye, and have a nice evening.
And the last final remark that an exit questionnaire will be on your screens right after you close this session. We will really appreciate your feedback to our sessions. And if you do not have time now, you will also receive a link via email. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasia. Thank you all. Goodbye.